This is the M1917 Light Tank, the first tank the US would ever produce. And here is its story. Once the United States finally entered the First World War in 1917, they had no tanks. By that point, it had been almost a year since the British Mark I had first seen battle. The US Expeditionary Forces would be lent tanks by both the British and the French. However, that wasn't enough. Deciding that they needed to equip their units with armor post haste, they would decide on the cheaper Renault FD. And here is where they encounter a problem. French factories producing these tanks simply couldn't produce the number required, as they already had issues producing enough tanks for their own country. So, the US government found a solution. Following a short negotiation, they acquired the license to produce their own Renault FDs. And so the M1917 Light Tank was born. It was a near copy of the Renault FD, for there were differences. Aside from some minor and cosmetic changes, the first big one was the engine. Instead of the original Renault one, the M1917 first had the Buda HU engine, and then later on the upgraded A1 variant had the Franklin engine, for which they had to lengthen the hull in order to fit it in. And armaments-wise, the main gun stayed the same, however, with a different gun mantlet. However, when it came to the machine gun armed variant, due to the US not using the caliber of the Hotchkiss machine gun, it was first changed for the Marlin Rockwell M1917 MG, and then on the A1 variant for the Browning M1919 MG. All in all, 950 of the M1917 tanks would be built in total. However, less than 100 would be built before the end of the war, and they would never see combat in it. These tanks would never see combat at all. They would be used in the First World War fundraisers across the US to help fund the army. After the war, they were used for plenty of different things. Outside of the odd case when 6 of them were sent to China as a part of the Marine Expeditionary Force to guard the Americans there in 1927, where they would just be driven around, these tanks were mostly used for training, dispersing riots, and they saw plenty of use in film, either as stand-ins for the Renault FD or as propaganda pieces. Some would technically serve in the Second World War when they would be sold to Canada as scrap to circumvent the laws concerning US neutrality, and they would be used for training there. Around 20 M1917 light tanks remain today in the US and Canada. Vozdra.